You're listening to Generations of Genius, the show where big ideas spark across generations. Every week, we'll tell stories and interview entrepreneurs of all ages, uncovering the genius that drives innovation forward. Powered by Innovation Station Kits on the Launch Network. Here's your host, award-winning inventor, children's author, educator, and serial entrepreneur, Kelly Shea.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Generations of Genius, the podcast where we explore in stories and journeys of incredible inventors while also seeing how ordinary people solved extraordinary problems. So I'm your host, Kelly Shea, and today we're traveling back more than 150 years to meet a woman who I think is so extraordinary and change something that you probably use all the time. But maybe you never really thought about, hey, someone had to invent this. I know I run into things all the time where, you're like, it's so simple. How did someone come up with this? Who invented this? And it's kind of funny to think about, like, someone had to create that, right? So that's what I'm super, super excited to explore with you all today. So question for you. Take a look around your house and maybe you have some grocery bags, or maybe you've put your lunch in a paper bag before or something like that, right? So have you ever stopped to wonder who invented the bag to have that flat bottom? Well, today I'm happy to share the story of the inventor behind it all. Her name is Margaret E. Knight, and often called the female Edison. So she goes by that a lot. And again, it's something that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but someone had to make it, right? The first version of a bag probably wasn't with that flat bottom, or, we have the plastic bags, paper bags, all of those. So it's something so simple, but there's so much that went into the process, which is where I'm really excited to share that story with you all today. Her story is filled with creativity, determination, and is a really important reminder to never let someone tell you that your ideas don't matter. So let's go right into the story. Margaret was born in 1838 in York, Maine. Even as a little girl, she loved figuring out things and how they worked. While many children spent their time playing games outside, Margaret was always taking toys apart just to see what was inside. She loved machines, gears, and solving problems. So this is something that we always run across when I speak with inventors. You often ask them, what was their journey like growing up? And a lot of entrepreneurs, successful CEOs, inventors will tell you that maybe they weren't the best in school, but they always took things apart around the house. And that's something that we should be encouraging as educators and parents. And, if you're around kids at all, or even adults, like, take things apart and figure out how they work, because that curiosity can take you a long way, just like it did for Margaret when she was making the paper bag. But going back, right, during the 1800s, this wasn't considered normal for girls. They didn't attend school as frequently, and it was believed that girls should learn how to sew and take care of a home, not necessarily work on machines, taking toys apart, things of that nature. But fortunately, Margaret didn't let those expectations stop her curiosity. Just because we're expected to do something doesn't mean that it's the right way of doing it. Obviously, listen to your parents, listen to trusted adults, but they're offering advice. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the right path for you to take at this time. It's the same thing with mentors. I always tell people, when someone tells you something, you might want to immediately jump to, no, that's not correct, or no, that's not what's working for me. But we have to take a step back and really let it sink in, because they're just speaking from their experiences and sharing their knowledge with us. They're obviously telling it to us for a reason. So I always encourage people to at least just write down that advice, because even if it's not relevant now, I bet you're going to have a moment in the future where you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's why they said that. And you might never have that moment, but it's always great to write that advice down because you might want to revisit it in the future. When Margaret was just 12 years old, she began working in a textile mill, and the machines inside the factory moved incredibly fast, but they could also be really dangerous. They obviously didn't have the safety standards that we have and know today, especially in these factories. So you can just imagine how dangerous that was at that time. One day, she witnessed a frightening accident when a machine malfunctioned. Instead of simply saying, "That's terrible," Margaret asked herself a typical inventor question: how could this be prevented? She designed a simple safety device that would automatically stop the machine if something went wrong. And today, many factories use the similar safety concepts to protect workers. Even as a young teenager, Margaret wasn't just noticing the problem, she was designing solutions. So I know we're going to kind of get into the paper bag in a second, but we all start somewhere, and obviously she had that mindset, right? Because she was already tinkering and figuring out ways to solve these problems, create solutions. And that's what we need to, again, encourage. Very basic design, but hey, she noticed a problem, and the paper bag wasn't her first product. Sometimes it takes the opportunity to start. A problem is an opportunity to solve something. So how can we do that, right? And that's what Margaret just had, that natural inventor mindset, that natural inventor instinct, where she knew, hey, I saw this problem. This is an opportunity to create a solution. And she just liked to solve problems, right? She wasn't looking to necessarily do anything, make a lot of money at this time. She just wanted to make a safer environment after witnessing a horrific event. But moving forward a little bit, years later, Margaret worked in a factory that produced paper bags. At this time, paper bags looked very different from the ones that you use today. They were shaped more like envelopes, and they couldn't stand up on their own, making them difficult to fill with groceries and supplies. I know I've tried to fill like a little package or envelope with multiple things, and it just kind of bulks, and it's not good. So Margaret watched the workers struggle every day. And again, she said, there has to be a better way. She spent months sketching ideas, building wooden models, testing ideas, and making improvements. Eventually, she invented a machine that could automatically fold and glue paper into flat bottom bags. This simple idea transformed shopping forever. Her invention made paper bags stronger, easier to pack, and much faster to manufacture. Millions and eventually billions of paper bags would be produced using the same basic concept. So I want to backtrack for a second and talk about her prototyping process. So I always mention to inventors, there's a difference between prototyping and a manufactured production sample. A prototype is a very basic design that I do not recommend you spend a lot of money on, because a prototype is just that. It is the initial creation, an MVP, as you will, a minimum viable product of what you want to create. And that is your time to do R&D and experiment, doing research and development, figuring out what works, what shape. So what's funny is most of the time people would maybe take a paper bag and cut it up, but she started with a wooden model because when she was trying with these paper bags, she was noticing how much harder it was to try and create this template or solution. So what she wanted to do was do something with more structure to start, because she wanted to ultimately give the bags more structure. So she took the wooden sample because it had more, it was more stable, if you will. And she adapted that to get the shape that she wanted. From there, she then took the more flimsy product, being a paper bag, and created some prototypes of that in the same shape as the wooden box. So when you're going through this process, a prototype, you shouldn't be spending tens of thousands of dollars. Now, if you have a technology, maybe. Sometimes the right path for someone is to go through with that prototype process. But when you're first starting out, and you're going to do a product, I very much recommend you take very basic tools around you and around your house to build off of. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? We learned this in past episodes. It's like, this is something that I will continue to advocate for forever, that you don't need to have the solution right away. You just need to start trying, figuring out with those items around you. A production sample is something pulled off of the factory line to check. So by that point, you want to have a more structured idea of what you're doing. A prototype isn't going to be made out of the exact and same materials, and it's not going to be the same process as production. So when you're having someone create CAD files for you, or if you're not familiar with CAD files, like those that you use to 3D print, a lot of times they're not manufacturable quite yet. So they might 3D print that for you or make it. But once you get to the production line and the production process where you're mass manufacturing units, it's a little bit of a different design and you have to make a few tweaks. So that's exactly what Margaret did. She had to make the machinery to make these tweaks, and then she saw how it applied to other applications. So this is just a great kind of process to learn from, because there is a difference between that prototype and production sample. Back to the story, but Margaret's biggest challenge wasn't necessarily building the machine, it came afterwards. A man named Charles saw her wooden model and copied her design. He rushed to file a patent himself. What was his argument, right? This will get some people angry here, but he claimed that a woman couldn't possibly understand such a complicated machine. That's hard. Some people, obviously this was a different time. Women weren't going to school as much. She was probably one of, if not the only woman during this time working in this factory or learning to engineer and things of that nature. But, we even encounter that a bit today. And it's not just gender related, it's also age related. I run into that all the time. How could a kid possibly do that? You would be amazed by someone who is a naturally born inventor mindset, what they can really do, how your brain works. So it's really sad to hear, but this is part of growth, right? Society had to learn from failures as well, I guess, but not making excuses, terrible. It's also, that was his argument for a patent. It's crazy to think that people thought that way. Imagine hearing someone say your invention couldn't be yours simply because of who you are. Margaret refused to give up, and she gathered her sketches, drawings, notes, and the wooden models she had built. Then she went to court. Margaret carefully explained every part of the machine and proved that she had invented it first. She won. In 1871, she received the patent for her paper bag machine. It's a reminder that documenting your ideas and believing in your work can make all of the difference. Now, this isn't something I recommend of rushing to get a patent right away. There are other processes to do first, because we encounter a lot of people in the invention space who rush to file a patent, but then again, their product isn't manufacturable the way that they patented it. So although she went through this process, and the information was stolen, if it's a good product, unfortunately, people are going to copy it. That is just the way of the world. It's flattery, because that means that you have something that other people want. But there is a balance to this process, a little bit of a give and take, and that's something really big in the invention world that people need to remember, is not everything is perfect right away, and we do have to kind of create that balance. And that's why you have to be open-minded, and an entrepreneur has to have an open-minded, a problem-solving kind of determination to walk through this correctly and make sure that they are kind of going through the motions while balancing multiple things at one time. So most people knew Margaret from the paper bag machine, but she didn't stop there. Throughout her life, she earned more than 25 patents on inventions, ranging from household tools to manufacturing equipment, and she constantly looked for ways to make everyday life easier. That's what inventors do. They notice problems that other people overlook, and they have the guts to solve them, right? You have to be a risk taker. That is one of the number one features of an entrepreneur, is willing to take a risk, because we often run into people who have this idea, they're sitting on it for 10 years. And although, yes, right timing, make sure you have the funding, make sure you're kind of squared away there. If you don't put yourself out there, it'll never come to fruition. It'll never actually become a reality. So we just need to get going. What Margaret taught us was that inventors aren't people who wait for inspiration to strike. They're people who stay curious. They ask questions, they observe, and they experiment. It's not going to be right the first time. I will say that in every single episode, and you'll hear that from almost all of my guests. They don't quit when something gets difficult. They keep going. They learn how to pivot, change their design, and fix it, because they're passionate about what they're doing. If you come up with a concept and you don't have the passion behind it, don't pursue it. You're not going to put all of your time and effort into it. You're not going to want to solve the problems you experience. You're going to have so many road bumps, and part of being an entrepreneur is being able to overcome those. I struggle with that as well. Everyone struggles with that. It's part of life, but we need to kind of find ways to solve that and go through the motions of fixing this process. She also reminds us that your age, your background, and what other people expect from you should never limit what you're capable of creating. I see it every day working with kids and inventors of all ages. I've worked with kids as small as 4 years old, all the way up to inventors that are 75 or 80 at times, right? So just because you're at a certain age doesn't mean you're not capable of creating something that can truly change the world. One idea can really change the world. And not everything's been invented. We get that a lot too. A lot of the best inventions are reinvented items. So how can we go through that process? Now, I'm going to challenge all of you to think like Margaret. Here, today's Generation of Genius Inventor Challenge that I want you all to kind of just think about and pursue is walk through your home, classroom, or neighborhood and look for something that feels inconvenient in your everyday life. Maybe your backpack tips over when you put it down, or your lunch is hard to open, or you have a hard time opening a bottle. Maybe toys aren't staying organized the way that you want them to. Ask yourself 3 questions. What is the problem? Because if you don't understand that problem, you're not going to make a solution for it. Why does it happen? Really understanding the structure and what's going on here. And then think about, what could I do to make it better? So if there's already a solution for it, do some research. Look at the reviews. Why are they getting bad reviews? Why is this not working for everything that it should be working for? And how can I make it better? Your first idea is not going to be perfect. Your first idea might already be something that's invented. But remember, Margaret spent months improving her invention before actually making sure that it worked. Every great invention starts with just that of noticing a problem and wanting to tackle it, having the passion to tackle it. But we can start with things that don't necessarily matter to us at this time, just to get in motion of thinking, why? Why are we doing this? Why is this a problem? How can we make this better? And that's our story for today. So thank you so much for joining another episode of Generations of Genius. I hope you enjoyed learning about Margaret Knight as much as I did. I think her story is absolutely inspiring. She has overcome so much in her life. And although it was 150 years ago, and a lot of, the things, some of it's outdated, right? Some of what happened might be outdated. But it's funny because the invention process remains the same, of having someone willing to take that risk, solve the problem, identify it, and really work to have the passion to make a change and make a difference. So if you enjoyed today's story, I really appreciate if you would subscribe, share this episode with a friend, parent, or teacher, and who knows, the next world-changing inventor could be listening right now. So until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop inventing. Thank you.